Okay, so this is the session, kind of open question and answer session. So anything, you could ask questions on anything that we covered in the course of this retreat.
Thank you, Bhante. My name is Emilio.
Yeah.
I have a few questions, actually. One is on restless.
Excuse me?
Restless. Restless?
Last class.
Restless.
Oh, restless, okay.
Okay. Is my accent, my Brooklyn accent. As I understand, restless is there up to Aracha.
Right.
And it's one of the last three that is let to go. And it's kind of fascinating because it's also there in everyone. I guess probably everyone in this room has this kind of restless,
right?
Especially in this modern time where you're always connected. I wonder two things. One is if it is related to the fact that there is this vibration in consciousness, which usually restless can be associated mechanically to kind of a vibration. That's one curiosity. And the second,
I didn't pick that up.
So there is one of the steps of the consciousness, which is the vibration.
Oh, the vibration, I see.
Yes, and I wonder if it is connected to that one, since restless can be associated with vibration mechanically.
You mean the vibration of the life of the bhavanga?
Yes.
No, it has no connection with that.
Has no connection.
Because that vibration occurs in anybody, even the arahats.
Okay.
In their cognitive process also, when some sense object impinges, that vibration it's something that's automatic.
Okay. So the other question, so if you have some comment in general, if you have seen along the year increase in the restless in layman you're dealing with due to modern area, and if you have any suggestion to us.
Have I observed an increase in restlessness?
Yes.
In modern life?
Well, yeah, you're
world?
dealing with people for many years, I assume, right? Teaching Dharma and do a retreat like this.
I think the people who come for teachings on Dhamma, compared to people on the outside, their restlessness, I would say, is rather moderate, but to a great extent under control. But people in the outside world have become so extremely restless, and I put a good part of the blame for this on, I'm sorry, I'm going to hurt some people's feelings, but it's the cell phone with all the information you can get. So people just can't. Back in the days when I was a young New Yorker, when traveling the subway, people would just sit there, or they would sit with the newspaper, reading the newspaper. Now everybody is going like this all the time. And even when you go out on the street in Manhattan, people are walking down the streets going like this, crossing the streets going like this. And so that access to all the information is just increasing the restlessness, just accelerating it, increasing it exponentially. And then I remember back in those days, college, university, to get the news at 7 p.m., you turn on the CBS Evening News, and there's just one news program that just covers the news for the day. Or if you're reading the newspaper, then you have maybe most newspapers would just have one edition in the course of the day. Maybe the bigger ones might have a morning edition and an evening edition. Now the news cycle, it seems, it's constantly changing every few minutes. You go to something like Huffington Post.
Alert.
What is that?
They're always alert on the latest news.
Yeah, there's always, every 15 minutes, I think, or every half an hour, the headline has to change. And I have to say, when we have a tweeter in chief, it's always sort of spurring on this news cycle. So you have the 24, now you have on cable news the 24-hour news cycle. And all of that, I think, is increasing people's restlessness.
But it is interesting that will be there up to Arhat when someone becomes an Arhat. So
It will be up to?
So it's there all the time until one becomes an Arhat. So it seems very hard to get rid of.
Yeah, and I don't think, well, of course one has to develop the mind in a way that will reduce the restlessness. But I think one doesn't sort of directly look at restlessness and say, how can I get rid of restlessness? But rather one takes up some kind of method for training the mind, and then one just applies one's diligence, one's energy, one's mindfulness to the cultivation of that particular method of mind training, whichever one feels congenial. And then as one progresses in one's development, then the restlessness will subside sort of in proportion to the extent of one's progress and skill in training the mind.
Thank you. I have another question, if you don't mind.
You have another one?
Yes.
Is it a short one?
I think so.
Okay.
I thought about a simile to remember what you explained, what happened during death and rebirth. Right?
During that.
And I wonder if you can criticize this simile that I thought about, so to see if I forgot this concept or not. It's almost like if we say the point of death is let's say the airport of New York, JFK,
Yeah.
and in the rebirth is another airport, let's say Beijing.
Another airport?
Another airport, another destination, right?
Yeah.
And basically the consciousness, nobody board this plane.
Yeah.
Not the consciousness, not the form, not the perception. There is no passenger on this plane.
Yeah.
So the consciousness is let go in New York City,
Yeah.
a new consciousness comes up in Beijing.
A new consciousness comes up.
In Beijing, in the
In Beijing,
destination,
I think.
right?
Okay.
However, the first consciousness, the one in New York,
Yeah.
check in a luggage, and that luggage is the karma.
Yeah.
And it gets picked up by the consciousness in Beijing. Is this a good simile? I missed something in that? Because this is the first time I understand this thing, so I wanted to remember.
I'll have to think about it to see whether it works in all respects.
Okay.
But it's clever. It's clever about the baggage being put on the plane and then being picked up in Beijing.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. And then.
So I'd like to go back to the where we started all of this with the 5 similes for the 5 khandas used in the Nikayas.
Right.
So physical matter being like foam,
Yeah.
and feelings being like bubbles, and so on. So what strikes me about each of these 5 similes is that each of them is referring to an actual thing which is being misperceived.
Right.
So foam is not completely void.
Yeah.
Rather, there actually is a certain degree of physical matter there. It's
Right,
just
yeah,
there's
yeah.
a lot of
Yeah.
air mixed in that makes
Yeah.
it look
Yeah.
other than it is.
Exactly. Yeah.
But that's due to a misperception or misapprehension of it.
Yeah.
However, this is still saying that there is an actual thing there which is being misperceived.
Yeah.
So then this creates this difficult situation of the basic question of, do things exist or not? Can things
Yeah.
be said to be
Yeah.
inherently existent and we're just misperceiving what's inherently existent?
Yeah.
So then this runs into the whole question of, do things exist, not exist, both exist and not exist,
Yeah.
neither exist
Yeah.
nor not exist?
Yeah.
And as far as I know, the only time that I can think of off the top of my head where the Buddha addresses this question has to do with an enlightened being after death. But I'm wondering particularly about this quadrilemma in relationship to perceived phenomena.
Yeah, yeah.
This is addressed to some extent in Huayan philosophy, where, unless I'm totally misunderstanding it, it seems to come down on the both and side of things. Like things are both existent and non-existent. But that creates its own somewhat sticky ontological issues.
Yeah.
So this may be a larger question than we have time frame for, but I'd just like your thoughts on this, on are these similes then referring to an actual existent basis which we're misperceiving?
Yeah.
Or is there something more complex going on here, as in the Huayan both existent and non-existent perspective?
I would say that from the standpoint of the early Buddhist teachings, that the phenomena, the things like the 5 aggregates, the 6 sense bases, the sense objects, exist, but they exist as impermanent conditioned processes. And sort of the way that we misperceive them and misconceive them is that we impose on them, superimpose on them the perception of them as having some kind of substantial existence. And particularly the big problem for the Buddha's teaching is that we take things to be permanent, and then we take them to be self, those things internal to oneself, one takes them to be self. Or we mistake the things outside to have some kind of substantial existence, and then we grasp onto them and take them to be mine.
So what's the distinction you're making between existence and substantial existence?
Substantial existence would be existing as existing apart from the net of conditionality, and existing not as processes which are undergoing constant change, but existing with some kind of solidity to them. Just before that sutta with the 5 similes, there is another sutta. I think the title of it, the name of it is Flowers, or Flower. In that sutta, the Buddha says, let me see if I could get it. Yeah, here. Yeah, the Buddha says, I do not dispute with the world, rather it is the world that disputes with me. The proponent of the Dhamma does not dispute with anyone in the world. Of that which the wise in the world agree upon as not existing, I too say that it does not exist. And of that which the wise in the world agree upon as existing, I too say that it exists. And what is it that the wise agree upon as not existing? Form that is permanent, stable, eternal, not subject to change. And so for feeling, perception, volitional formations, consciousness that's permanent, stable, eternal, not subject to change. So the wise agree that that does not exist. And the Buddha says, I too agree that that does not exist. And then he continues, and what is it that the wise in the world agree upon as existing, of which I too say that it exists, that is form, that is impermanent, that's dukkha, subject to change, and the same for feeling, perception, volitions, and consciousness. the wise in the world agree upon that as existing, and I too say that it exists.
Well, this appears like it may have formed some of the basis for the Sarvastivadin approach that all phenomena have an absolute inherent existence of their own,
Yeah,
which then was harshly condemned in later developments of Buddhist philosophy.
Yeah, but what the Sarvastivadins asserted is that the Dhammas exist through all three periods of time, past, present, and future, but it's only their manifestation that occurs in the present, which I have to confess it's a doctrine that I've never really understood. But I think what's clear from the sutta is that the Buddha is saying that the five aggregates exist, but they don't exist as permanent, not subject to change, but they exist as impermanent phenomena that are subject to change. Okay, I see a hand in the back. And your name again?
Margot.
Margot, I'm sorry, that's right.
Bhante, I wanted to ask you a little bit about the schedule. Because after this, it says we share merits.
Yeah,
There will be some who would like to take 3 refuges and precepts, and then we depart.
yeah.
And the next thing is to come back next year. So I'm wondering if there's something actually between leaving here and next year that we can do to actually explore this. How would you recommend that we take what we've explored here and pursue it throughout the rest of the year?
What I think, if you really want to study the Abhidhamma more, what I would suggest, if you don't have the comprehensive manual of Abhidhamma, then obtain a copy, or it's downloadable. I mean, we had the link on the BAUS website for this course. Okay, then I gave in 4 years, over the Labor Day weekend, 2013, 14, 15, and 16, I gave the retreat based on that comprehensive manual of Abhidhamma. And all of those videos, thanks to Jason here, have been posted on YouTube. So if you search for my name, Abhidhamma, then start with 2013 and start with the first one, and then you go through all of the lectures, and then go to 2000, when you finish that, then go to 2014 and go through those. If you're not exasperated by that point, you could go to 2015 and then go through those lectures. And then last year's 2016. So each one has about 15 lectures. That's if you want to pursue Abhidharma. So if you just want to pursue Dharma, then there are probably many other options. Like, where do you live?
In Barrie, at
In
Barrie, at the Insight Meditation Society.
You live at the Insight Meditation Society?
Yes.
Wow. I mean, then there's many opportunities to learn Dhamma there.
Yeah.
But I don't know whether there's anybody teaching Abhidharma there.
There isn't.
Maybe not, yeah. So to learn the Abhidharma, then, that would be the option.
Thank you.
You're not Margot McCufflin, are you?
No, she worked before me.
She works?
She's another Margot who no longer works there, so I'm a different Margot.
I see.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
She's the one who comes online for my Pali class, I think.
Mm-hmm.
She's in California now?
She may be, yeah.
Oh, no, I think she's in Massachusetts. I think she said she's in Massachusetts also.
If she's
Anyway.
working there, she's very, very quiet.
Okay, I don't think I got your name. Yeah.
Okay, this is my first time here. My name is Radha Krishna.
Radha
And
Krishna. I see.
originally from India and now
Yeah.
from California.
Yeah.
So my question, in sort of teeing off of what Margot asked, yesterday's meditation session on the aggregates was very powerful for me personally. I appreciate that and thank you very much for it. When it came to the consciousness aggregate,
Yeah.
what I found going on in my mind was sort of one volition or one thought structure intercepting another thought structure and trying to examine it,
Yeah.
as opposed to trying to find something more fundamental that's consciousness.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's sort of trying to re-examine near memory
Yeah.
of a previous thought, and that's what I could do.
Yeah.
So my request was for the practice that we do at home, any guidance in this matter?
Yeah, the consciousness aggregate is very, very subtle. And first, what I would have to say is that the way I was teaching the 5 aggregate meditation yesterday, it was more, I would call this a reflective meditation. It's not really the deep insight into the selfless nature of the 5 aggregates, which that requires that one builds up a really strong momentum of concentration, and then that one is persistently examining the change in the phenomena. For most people, it would have to be continued over days, perhaps weeks. So what I just wanted to do is to give like a little taste of the contemplation of non-self. But, okay, then I'll continue and say that of the 5 aggregates, the one that's most subtle and sort of most difficult to discern is the consciousness aggregate, which I think is why in the layout of the 5 aggregates, the Buddha placed it last. So the way I would do this, or actually two methods that can be used. One requires really very, very careful attention and sort of focused discernment, and that is trying to leave the contents of the mind in the background. Always there'll be contents, but one doesn't pay attention to the contents, but one tries to focus the beam of awareness, in a sense, back upon itself, so that one is just being aware of the awareness itself, and then seeing that this awareness, or contemplating that this awareness is not mine, not I, not myself. And so it requires a lot of patience and persistence in order to be able to pick up on the awareness as apart from the content of the mind. Okay, the other method is to turn the content, or turn the focus of attention upon the mind itself, and just, one has to, in a sense, imagine that there's a little like opening, almost imagining the mind to be something physical, and there's like a hole out of which thoughts and mental content emerges into the field of awareness. And what one does is to bend the attention or the focus onto that hole and just keep on watching that hole to see any kind of thought or other mental content arise. And what one finds is that as one goes on watching and watching, I compare this to a cat at the hole in the wall watching for the mouse to come out. So as one goes on watching, the content of thoughts starts to thin out, so that thoughts come bubbling up less frequently until one is just watching, and then one applies to that watcher the notion, this is not mine, this is not I, this is not myself. So those are 2 ways that it can be done. Okay, Richard and then Lucille.
Yeah. Okay. The thing that strikes me about the 5 aggregates after going through this treatment of it is that the form aggregate, rupa, is in some parts of Buddhist doctrine treated as first of the 5.
Right.
Right. But here is, it's treated separately or more separately, and then the sequence, there's the consciousness and perception and volition and and feeling well before,
Yeah.
right. That's treated somewhat separately. Now, what interests or what I'm curious about is not simply the distinctions amongst them, but things which are not distinguished. Like there is, with form mostly seems to be about one's own body, but there's not the same kind, or there's not a clear distinction between one's own body and other people's bodies, and between human bodies or one's own body and other physical things. And the other distinction the other thing that strikes me as curious is there doesn't seem to be any clear distinction between things of human origin and natural things. That is, for instance, in phenomenology and existential, there's a big distinction between what's natural, what's present at hand, and what's ready to hand, which is modeled mostly on the idea of tools.
Yeah.
That is, human-made things are considered separately from the world of natural things.
Yeah.
Now, I'm interested in just why that is. I think it's probably historical, because I think that with most things that people did in an agrarian society at that time, right, it didn't seem to them that there was that much of a difference.
Yeah.
But I think the difference has been steadily increasing. Like at the time that this was written, the human race did not have the capacity to destroy all life on Earth. Omnicide didn't exist.
Yeah.
And now we've got 2 methods of doing it, too. We've got nuclear war, and we also have global warming.
Yeah.
And so that is the human sphere, that is the range of human-created things and their effects, has vastly increased in size and importance over the world that the Buddha was describing, right?
Yeah.
And that seems to me to have enormous implications. Also, for instance, with the question of what we think is, what we tend to naturally think now is real. Like with the communication problem, you have these, continuous headlines and such, and it becomes more and more like a form of consciousness and less like a form of rupa. And our relationship to it has a character that it didn't used to have, because it's humanly created, but it's created for consciousness, which is not what other...
Remember the 4 conditions that I laid down in asking a question?
No, okay. I want to ask you. Okay. If you were to rewrite this now yourself, how would you alter those fundamental concepts to reflect the kind of world that we now feel we're dealing with?
Yeah. First, that would be a major project.
Yeah, right. But I mean, what strikes you as really historically relevant in that?
I would say
effort?
What's extremely important, I would say it's implicit in the teachings of the Dhamma, but maybe not brought out so explicitly and clearly in the ancient texts, because it's a very different historical period. And that would be the intricate interconnections between events that take place all over the world and the way human activities in one particular location through this complex but intricate networks of conditionality affect events that take place in extremely remote parts of the world. For example, I mean, the most, maybe at least one of the most obvious ways is the way the extravagant lifestyle of at least some Americans, but maybe even many middle-class Americans, consuming large quantities of, or utilizing large quantities of fossil fuels, consuming many material goods, is having impacts on changing the climate, so that it's having very severe impacts, well, in the United States itself, as we can see, as well as in Africa, South Asia, well, actually all over. Australia has had heat waves, floods, wildfires. Yeah, so that's what I would say is probably the most momentous aspect of the change or contemporary developments, which would have to lead to a kind of reconceptualization of the way the teaching is to be formulated. And one thing that you said I don't agree with at the beginning, where you said that there's no clear distinction between one's own bodies and the bodies of others. In fact, the teaching says whatever form there is internal, that means pertaining to oneself, and external. And then in something like the Satipatthana Sutta, he dwells contemplating, say, the body internally, and he dwells contemplating the body and the body externally. So there is a clear distinction between one's own bodies and the bodies of others, one's own form and the form of others. Okay, somebody, it was Lucille.
Yes.
Yeah.
Why does death arise? What is its cause and its result? Is it like someone's life purpose or production of karma is finished and they're ready to have a blank slate, so to say? Or, why?
Okay.
Like, what determines when the end point is?
Death is inherent in the life process. I mean, there's just no possibility of once taking birth of not facing death. So death takes place inevitably as part of the life process. The texts mention, I think, 2 causes of death. One is the exhaustion of the life faculty. That is, say, in human life, there's a certain fixed lifespan. Actually, in human life, the lifespan is not fixed, but people, because of their karma will determine them as having a lifespan of a particular length. So some people have, just by the force of their karma, their natural lifespan might be 80 years. Other people, by the force of their karma, the lifespan might be 70 years. Other people, the force of the karma...
What do you mean by force of their karma?
That the karma that generates the rebirth, the karma that powers the rebirth, has a certain force, like a certain momentum, that if left uninterrupted can continue for 70 years, 80 years, 90 years, perhaps the longest is somewhere in the 120s. But there can be many other causes that come in and interrupt the lifespan, so that the lifespan does not come to its complete fulfillment. For example, an automobile accident, an illness.
But isn't that part of their karma as well, like dying early?
Yeah, that could be a result of karma. I don't know whether in every case one could say that it's karma is responsible, but certainly karma can become, some kind of karma can become activated and an interrupt cause a premature dissolution or termination of the lifespan. So the inherent karma of the being is directed, the inherent karma of the being has the potential to endure, for the lifespan to endure a certain number of years, as I said, 70, 80, 90, and so on, some other karma can intervene and then cause a premature end to the lifespan.
Okay, and one thing, say someone, can karma be really direct in the way that, like, if you kill someone and then your next life or in a future life, your karma is to die early? Does it come back that directly? Like, if you end someone's life prematurely, will your life end prematurely?
I would say one can't say that this is definitely going to happen, but what one could say is that taking the life of another being, particularly as human beings, taking the life of another human being, creates a karma which, if it gets the opportunity to ripe under the maximum conditions, it will result in one's own life being terminated prematurely. So that the karma has that is sort of the natural potential or disposition of that karma. But the interactions of karma are extremely complex. So if a person, say, is taken life, but then they recognize that they've done something wrong, and then they do a lot of wholesome deeds, the wholesome deeds can create a positive karma which will weaken the impact of the negative karma of killing. So say in a future life, then instead of undergoing death, being killed by others, they might undergo an injury from which they recover.
Okay, and I had another thing that I was wondering about, which is, like, say someone dies prematurely and the loss that others experience,
Yeah.
like, is that karma a result of maybe creating that loss for others in previous lives? Like, do you know what I mean?
No.
Like, say, just a very
Okay.
direct example. Like, if I kill someone and then in my next life someone who I cherish dies early, is that like the production of that karma of my loss? Is that from that, or can it be just like I needed to experience a loss in my life journey to get to another point?
No, I say pretty definitely. I mean, I'm not omniscient, so I can't say for sure. But I say pretty certainly it's not the case that if you undergo the loss of someone who's dear, that this is the karmic result of your having taken the life of another being in an earlier existence.
What would it be a result of?
I'd say it could be some kind of unfolding of karma, or it can just be the nature of human life, that we
Right.
suffer the loss of those who are dear to us.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
But what would be said in Buddhism is that the way we respond to the loss of those who are dear is something which is not governed by our past karma, but that is governed by our present disposition of mind. So when we suffer the loss of loved ones, it might be that we're overwhelmed by grief and sorrow, but if we have like some understanding of the law of impermanence and inevitable separation, then when we lose a loved one, though we will undergo grief for some time, we could use this right understanding to emerge from it. Whereas somebody who doesn't have this understanding of impermanence and separation, and sort of has that underlying premise that we're all going to be together for eternity, when they suffer the loss of a loved one, then they just find it impossible to break out of their grief.
Now it's my turn for question.
Good, good. I was wondering. You have to give Hillary.
I still have a question in regard to registration. Because
isn't that the Abhidhamma?
Yes. It has always been in my mind that you mentioned that the Jivanga is not the cause for the registration. Then the registration is just a karma, it's just a resultant that came from the previous karma.
Yeah.
But then by the word registration, to me it sounds like it's registering whatever just happened, or the Jivanga. So if it's not registering the mind process they had just gone through, such as the Jivana, then can you tell us more about registration? What's the function of this registration?
Yeah, actually, that is a very good question. And this is related, I think, to a question that came up yesterday. Okay, when one registers an impression so that it's easier to recall on a later occasion. Okay, so this morning I took a walk down the road to the gate, and alongside the road, I was with Venerable Changre, and then he pointed out there's a deer, and then I looked, and there was this beautiful young deer looking at us, very, very close. So this registered, so now I can remember that deer. So there must have been a registration consciousness, and since it was a very pleasant-looking deer, we decided it must be a wholesome resultant registration. If it was a bear or a tiger that had escaped the zoo, then it would be an unwholesome resultant registration consciousness. And if it was a tiger that had escaped the zoo, I probably wouldn't be here to explain. Anyway, so the registration takes place so that one can recollect at a later time. But where are these registered impressions? Where are they? And I don't find an explanation in the canonical Abhidhamma texts or in the Abhidhamma commentaries. So it's a very perplexing question. And this could have been, as I said last night, this could have been or probably was one of the bases for the Yogacara school to formulate the idea of the Alaya Vijnana, the storehouse consciousness. You're going to say something else?
So does that mean that registration is perception then? Is the function is perception? Because you said you remain a mark so that we will remember later.
Okay, from one angle, one would say that perception is like one mental factor. So it's the mental factor of the Pali word sanya. So it's one mental factor. We could also use the word perception. We could say that a whole Javana series performs a perception. So in this case, it would definitely be like the whole Javana process performing an act of perception in which the mental factor of perception, that single chaitasika or mental factor, is playing the prominent role. And there is that perception in the registration consciousness, but the registration consciousness should not only be perceiving, but should be perceiving in such a way that the impression is stored and is capable of being called up on a later occasion. Just like with the computer, if we have typed a bit of text, like typing a letter, then we press save, and then even though we close up the letter, but the text that we've typed is somewhere there. Is it in the hard disk of the computer? It's on the hard disk. I save it. Okay. Okay, we're just saying it's saved on the hard disk. Whether that's correct or not. Okay, so it's when registration takes place, the impression is there someplace, but according to the way the Bhavanga is explained in the traditional Abhidhamma text, the Bhavanga always has one object, and it's the same type of consciousness. So it doesn't fit very well, or doesn't serve as a very good candidate for storing up the impressions of current experience. So I don't know, what is the RAM in the mental system? Yeah. Is short-term or long-term memory? Yeah, yeah. Okay, we have Allison, I think, has a question.
Actually, I'm just going to finish the question of Jishi Fa's question yesterday.
I see Jishu has a question.
Yeah, her question, first question, I interpret incorrectly. She's not talking about storing.
Yeah.
She was asking is whether Bhavanga is the function of a Bhavanga is recall all those memories or perceptions or images. Simply just recalling is the function of Bhavanga, is recalling all those storage, the memories, all the collections of images and stories and perceptions and all the stuff. That's what she's asking. She's not asking about Bhavanga is storing all this. She's talking about Bhavanga, whether is almost like picking up. Is it like one cheetah, but it's picking up these memories, these things. Oh, I'm sorry. Again, I'm wrong.
班的，其实我的昨天的问题是这样的，那个有分心，它本来是演过去的心嘛，啊。
She said Bhavanga is belong to the past, right? Past.
It is a result of the past, but the Bhavanga is always occurring in the present, whenever there isn't active conscious process.
是过去的结果，但是是现在的心。
没有，这样我的问题是这样，是说，当我们是在做一件事情的时候，像我今天来听课，啊，那我昨天听课的的内容什么啊？这是我们能够想起来，这个是不是有分心的显现出来？
Okay. She just using example. Like for example, yesterday we listened to your talk, and today we were able to recollect whatever you taught and we received.
Yeah.
Is that part of a function of Bhavanga? That's what she wanted to ask.
Okay, that puts it very clearly. And this almost relates to Hillary's question in the way I answered it. The way the Bhavanga is explained in the traditional Abhidhamma text, it is never said, to my knowledge, it's never said to have that function of storing up the memories and acting as a kind of memory bank from which the memories come up again. And if you're looking for a theoretical explanation of how memory occurs within the Abhidhamma system, I just have to say that it's a question or problem that doesn't seem to be addressed. And so then it becomes something of a problem, a problem that have to call the great Burmese Abhidhamma masters and say, please help us, we have this problem. How do you address this? And perhaps it's discussed in some later treatise, like maybe some 18th century, 19th century Burmese Abhidhamma masters may have discussed this, because the Burmese are the ones who specialize in the Abhidhamma. But I'm not familiar with the discussion of that problem from the Abhidhamma commentaries that have come from the early period. Okay, that's Nat.
Thank you, Bhante. From like a technical or mechanical point of view, why is it that the Arahant's chitta doesn't create any resultants? I understand it from a definitional point of view, like an Arahant is somebody who doesn't create results, but is there something to do with his intention, or that what exactly happens from the change from a non-returner to an Arahant that such that the Arahant doesn't make any resultants?
Yeah, actually, more correctly, when we say that the Arahat doesn't create karma, but the Arahat experiences the results of past karma. So he can't avoid the results of karma created in previous lives and perhaps in the past in this present life. But it's said that karma, what underlies the creation of all karma are these twin roots of samsara, ignorance and craving. So even when it's a wholesome citta, a wholesome state of mind, but that wholesome state of mind is because the ignorance and craving are still present even in latent form within the stream of consciousness. And so the mind is creating karma. With wholesome states of mind, it's creating wholesome karma. With unwholesome states of mind, it creates unwholesome karma. But when ignorance and craving have been eliminated, then there's action, and we would judge it to be wholesome action from our point of view, but it doesn't create wholesome karma. So that is why.
Thank you.
Yeah, but arhats do reap the results of past karma. And then the most famous example of this is the case of Moggallana, the Buddha's second chief disciple, who had said like aeons ago he had killed his own parents. And that karma, as a result, he had been reborn in hell. And then he spent a long time in hell. And then after coming out from that, he eventually changed the direction of his life. And then he encountered previous Buddhas and then cultivated good qualities till he had tremendous accumulations of merit, and he became the Buddha's second chief disciple. But there was still a residue of that unwholesome karma from killing his parents that had not yet been exhausted. And so in his life as the Arhat disciple of the Buddha, he was assassinated by some people who were jealous of the Buddha, and so they wanted to eliminate the Buddha's second chief disciple. Okay, I think somebody, 1, 2, 3, then that will have to be the end. Yeah.
Thank you, Bhante. I had a question about the root of hatred.
Yeah.
It's not wrong view in the Abhidhamma.
Yeah.
So I had two questions to that. What's the root in the suttas? Is it wrong view or something else? And
The root of hatred.
uh
Okay, wrong view itself is not a root. Wrong view would be an accompanying factor. The roots are only greed, hatred, and delusion, the unwholesome roots. But like wrong view is an accompanying factor, one would say. Okay, in the suttas, I'd say that's not explicitly discussed. I mean, there's a lot of discussion about wrong views, but it's not explicitly said that wrong views are associated with greed or whether they're associated with hatred. It's just not treated in those terms, in those kind of analytical terms.
Okay, I'm sorry, I misunderstood earlier today. I thought you made a distinction that wrong view was not associated with hatred, it was associated with greed, but that it was not associated with hatred.
What I said is that in the Abhidhamma system, wrong view always occurs in the cittas, the states of mind that are rooted in greed. And as we could see from the two cittas that are rooted in hatred, wrong view is not present there. Yeah, but I said, this is like, as my personal opinion, that is pretty clear to me that in minds that could be boiling over with hatred, they also have wrong views which feed into that hatred, and also they're a kind of cyclical pattern. So the wrong view feeds in and intensifies the hatred, and then the hatred comes out in wrong view. So, but that's my personal opinion. It's not, we don't find that in the Abhidhamma system as such.
And so what's the distinction between delusion and wrong view in regard to hatred? Because I think you
Yeah.
I think I heard that you say delusion was.
Yeah, delusion is the absence of correct knowledge. It's ignorance. It's that which covers up, said to cover up the true nature of things. Whereas, so delusion doesn't take on a formulated, it doesn't appear in a formulated, it doesn't take on formulation or theoretical formulation or doctrinal formulation. Whereas wrong view is expressed by way of a doctrinal formulation. So the self is permanent, eternal, not subject to change. That is a view. Whereas delusion is just like the failure to see that the empirical personality consists of the 5 aggregates which are undergoing constant arising and passing away. Okay, I had pointed to a few. Okay, then we take you, then Sering, then Will, and then done.
Thank you. Quick, it's more curiosity than a burning question. It seems to me that time is not addressed in this system of thought. It is sort of indirectly addressed when you talk about ripening under fire, ripening, maturing under fire. And you mentioned it when you talked about the processes, mental processes, 1 bhavanga, 2 bhavanga. You mentioned a little bit in that regard. But is time just superfluous to this entire aggregates?
No, actually time, it's a good question. And time is actually brought up in the discussion of the aggregates. In fact, in the definition of the aggregates, the Buddha says, for example, with each one, whatever material form there is, past, future, and present, whatever feeling, perception, volitions, consciousness there is, past, future, and present. So those 3 periods of time are mentioned. And then in the Visuddhimagga, there's a discussion of the meanings of past, present, and future in terms of different ways of understanding temporal duration. Okay, then I think we came to Tsering.
Bhante, right now in my country, that's Bhutan, there is a recitation of the sutras, I think. It's done by the chief abbot, and it's going to continue for about 3 months. And it starts from 6:30, ends at 6:30, and thousands of people, at least 20,000 people go there and sit. How, they're just sitting there, and how does that lead to liberations? And then we here studying Abhidhamma, how does that differ from getting liberated?
I would say listening to the recitation of the sutras, that is considered like a meritorious deed, a deed that's storing up. It's one form of merit, so it's performing a religiously significant activity that generates, if one listens with faith, devotion, and if one understands the language, trying to follow the recitation to understand the meaning of the words. So through faith and devotion, it will be developing purity of mind, and if one is listening to understand the meaning, then it will be developing a kind of wisdom. But here, when we're studying the Abhidhamma, then we're into the real nitty-gritty. Yeah. So now we're trying to develop, we call this the wisdom that comes from learning, which is a preparation for the wisdom that comes from practice or meditation. And in fact, when we do the meditation, then we're also cultivating the wisdom that comes from meditation.
Thank you, Bhante. Thank you.
Okay, the last question of the whole retreat.
Thank you. So I have 2 questions. One of them is just really quick. So you said that even in Narat, their previous karma still affects them.
Yeah.
Do you know if Angirmala You know who I'm talking about?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Yeah. Did he ever get any of that previous karma? Because I imagine he generated quite a lot of negative karma before he became an Arhat.
Yeah. So for the people who don't know about Angulimala, he was a serial killer in the time of the Buddha. He lived in the forest, and whenever people would come walking through the forest, he was very big and strong physically. He would attack them, kill them, and then he would cut off one of their fingers and let it dry out until just the bone was left. And then he would sew the bones together into a necklace that he wore around his neck. Then the Buddha heard about him, and the Buddha went into the forest, and people were warning the Buddha, don't go there, it's very dangerous, this killer Angulimala is there. And the Buddha went into the forest, and Angulimala tried to attack the Buddha. The Buddha used his spiritual power to evade Angulimala, and then the Buddha told Angulimala, stop, stop. But Angulimala said, the Buddha is the one who stopped. He's not walking, I'm running after him. And then Angulimala realized that the Buddha had come just out of compassion for him, so he dropped his sword, then bowed down to the Buddha, and then the Buddha had him ordained as a monk, and then after some time he became an Arhat. But then when he went on his alms round, people recognized him, that this is Angulimala wearing the robe of a monk, and so they attacked him and threw things at him and beat him. And so then he came back to the Buddha, his head was bleeding, his body was all bruised. And then the Buddha said to him, in this way you are experiencing the karma that you've created, which if you had not become a monk and had not become an Arhat, then you would have experienced that karma for a long time in hell.
Yeah. My second question is a little more complex. Has to do with languages. Because you talking about time and how time is perceived differently in other languages, if I spoke Hopi, which has a very different concept of time, would I be unable to understand the Dharma because time in Hopi is just treated so differently? They don't experience time in there aren't words for past, present, and future.
Yeah.
So.
I don't know.
Okay. That was just a linguistic question.
Speaking about time, we're actually beyond our stopping time by 7 minutes. So now let us end the retreat by doing the sharing of the merits. And so when we spend these last Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, last 4 days listening to the Dhamma, teaching the Dhamma, discussing the Dhamma, sitting in meditation, performing various tasks to help the monastery, then we generate kusala karma, or wholesome karma, or merit. And so now we're going to share the merit. So if there are any particular people that you want to share the merit with, then in your mind you could share the merit with them, particularly deceased, any relatives or close friends who have passed away. You could share the merit with them, and share the merit with the devas, the bhutas, the fierce spirits, and so on. And I want to share the merit with one particular person, or actually two people. You know, the past 4 years, Bo Wei Chang has come, and she's always been very diligent translator for the Chinese speakers. Now her husband, Henry, who also came to the Abhidhamma retreat several times, has very, very advanced stage of cancer. And so she is looking after him I think at the hospital, or perhaps they went back home. So let us also bring them into our mind and help to share the merit with them. Okay, so I'll recite the verses in Pali. Akasata chabumata deva naga mahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu sasanam Akasata Jabumata Deva Naga Mahidika Punyantang Anumoditva Chirang Rakantu Desanang Akasata Jabumata Deva Naga Mahidika Punyantang Anumoditva Chirang Rakantu Mang Parang Etavatacham Hehi Sampadang Punya Sampadang Sabbe Devanumodantu Sabba Sampati Siddhya Etavatacham Hehi Sampadang Punya Sampadang Sabbe Bhutanumodantu Sabba Sampati Siddhya Etavatacham Hehi Sampadang Punya Sampadang Sabbe Satanumodantu Sabba Sampati Siddhya Pavakupadaya Vichihetato Etantare Satakayupapanna Rupya Rupicha Sanya Sanino Dukha Pamuchantu Pusantu Nibuting. Then you say sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And Jishu Fasha, does she want to give the vote, we call the vote of thanks to the people who contributed to the retreat? Yeah, I should mention that Venerable Jishu has been the coordinator for this retreat, and so she should deserve a round of applause. And, okay, I think she's going to give the vote of thanks to the other people. And maybe Hillary will be shy about translating words of appreciation for her, but if you've noticed, she has been sitting in the back for the last 4 days, very, very diligently translating from my English into Chinese. And I always say that my task is much easier than that of the translator, because for me it's just a matter of getting the ideas from the mind to the mouth, so I know what I want to say, but she has to listen to what I'm saying, figure out the meaning, which maybe is not always so easy, and then translate it into Chinese before I utter the next statement.
Thank you. It's my honor.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And she came up from Kentucky to do the translation. And
各位学员，因为我们这个阿毗达摩的课程已经延续了这个这么多年了，也很感谢大家的这个热烈的支持。
I want to thank everybody for your great support. We have this Amitabha camp for many, many years consecutively, so I'm very thankful for your support.
我想在这么多年中我想你们或多或少都是受益不少。
I'm sure you have benefit little or more from this Abhidhamma retreat.
当然也是希望你们明年也能够这么踊跃的这个参加这个阿毗达摩的课程。
I sincerely hope that you will come back next year to support this Abhidhamma retreat.
我这里只能够以这个感谢的心希望我们的这个班爹他也是非常的辛苦这么多年来他是一个人就是全部都是包办下来是非常非常的辛苦。
Sincere gratitude to Pandey because he himself conduct this retreat from early in the morning to the evening consecutively for 4 days. It's a lot of work and it's very hard for him too. So very sincere gratitude.
我们一个感恩的这个掌声，感谢班爹的这个慈悲的心。好了，班爹 continue。 讲完了。
She said she's finished.
What is that?
She is finished with her. She wants everything she wants to say. So it's your turn.
But we have to mention Jason. Jason is indispensable here.
不是，他说要感谢 Jason.
You know, we have the expression in English, "Jack of all trades." Well, here we don't use the expression jack of all trades. We use the expression Jason of all trades.
是的，因为我们能够有这么顺利的这个能够让大家来这里听法，当然有很多的因缘的基础。
Without all these great conditions in presence, we wouldn't have such a successful retreat.
当然，我们也非常感谢戒生，还有这个恒力法师，他们都在后面的，就是做了很多工作了。
Sincerely gratitude to Jason and Venerable Henyi. They have done a lot of work behind the scene.
当然，我们这一次的课程结束了，但是戒生的工作还没有完，他过后还要在这个YouTube 的上面，他还要整理出来哦。
Even though the retreat may have ended for most of us, but for Jason, his work is not done yet. He still have a lot of work to put the talk into YouTube.
还有，我们当然更要感谢厨房的法师还有义工们哦，他们也是就是很辛苦哦。我们每天就是要想怎么样煮给我们的这个学员吃啊，也是非常的伤脑筋。
We also want to express our sincere gratitude to the venerables and volunteers in the kitchen and the dining hall. They every day they work very very hard and try to cook delicious food for all participants.
然后我们这边的学员还有不只是当学员，还是当义工的瑞啊，他也是早上就是去帮忙，中午也去厨房帮忙，然后完了才下来听课。他这个精神我们也要非常的这个赞叹。
请瑞站起来。
Please stand up.
Also want
给大家认识
to
一下。
show our sincere gratitude to Ray. 不知道是。
Ray,
okay. He's not only the participant, he's also a volunteer. So he has been working day and night, try to help out with everything.
还有我们这个幕后的这个幕后的英雄啊，当然是我们的这个办公室的职员，还有那些就是义工，他们也是出了很大的力。你们的睡觉的地方都是那些义工他们整理的。
We also all the heroes behind the scenes, including the staff and the volunteers in the office. They not only helping out with every little things, but also help us setting up the dormitories. So we really sincere gratitude to them.
还有我感觉到这一次的学员他们的品质非常好。
She thinks that the quality of the participants they are just excellent. You guys are just excellent.
而且他们在晚上疗房的时候，尤其女众那边都很安静的。
We have been very quiet even in the dormitory, so that is quite very good.